You're on mute.
It's a shame you missed the opening. It was really wonderful. I had it all ready to go, and I was going to say, welcome to another edition of Full Course Yellow, in Pit Lane's weekly podcast, coming to you live from the world's 10th most livable city, Grand Prix City, Melbourne. Great to have you once again. We've got an interesting show tonight. We're a bit light on numbers tonight. Doc is out traipsing across the Victorian countryside, looking for bits and pieces of old falcons. So if you see him, stay clear. Don't get between Doc and an old falcon. It's not a good idea. That's for sure. But joining us this week for a bit of a chat on all things motorsport is our regulars, our floor manager from In Pit Lane, Formula One Tragic, Pete Johnson. G'day, Pete. How are you?
Right, how are you?
And also joining us once again is Chris Ritchie in front of is that an Elfin behind you? That is, yes, it's the Elfin MR8, I would imagine. So, a classic Australian Formula 5000 for those of you not watching. But before we go there, let's see who else is joining us. Mad Cow Mark is back with us again. G'day, Mad Cow. How are you? Tony P is with us. We'll bring these up. There we are. We've got Tony P joining us again. Good evening. Hello to Jeff McWigan. Box is with us again. Just switched over from Goodwood. Yeah, big weekend coming up at Goodwood today and Friday. Are sort of they've turned it into like an auto show, and they do a really good job of it. Saturday and Sunday are like the really big days, and I've said before, I think the live stream from Goodwood was years ahead of its time. It's been, it has been the gold standard, I think, in live streaming over the past few years. So we'll have a link to that at the In Pit Lane website, inpitlane.com, or you can, of course, just check it out live at Goodwood. So hello to Box, to Gemini. Hi, Mum. Yes. Hello to Gemini's mum. It sounded like Rove McManus. Say hi to your mum for me. There we are. Why are we only 10th most livable? Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but things have been a bit quiet on the streets of Melbourne for the last 2 years. But we're still way ahead of Sydney. So, and that's the main thing. I mean, we're Australia's most livable city, and that's the main thing, and the home of the Australian Grand Prix for another 10 years, as we said last week on the program. We'll get up there again. Mad Cow saying good day to Gemini. There we are. Got Giuseppe. G'day, Giuseppe. How are you? Good to catch up with you again. And also Paul Van der Acker is joining us once again. So evening to Paul as well. Okay, well, let's start having a look at what's happened around the world of motorsport. Pete, did you catch the weekend's action in the supercars from
Yes.
Darwin?
Yep, I did. It was interesting. Suddenly, after they're making noises about the way Shane Van Gisbergen conducts his passes in the second race, in the last race, he got it. They finally gave him it was undeserved, I think, because he's was just doing the same thing as he always does, and they've never batted an eyelid. But now suddenly everyone's making a noise about it. They gave him a 15-second penalty for it.
Well, that's the way it works, doesn't it? If you scream loud enough, it's like in football as well. You keep hearing, somebody will jump up and down and say, "Well, they've got to do something about this holding the ball." And for the next week, they give 101 holding the ball, penalties or whatever it is. So, yeah, I suppose they keep an eye on it. But what do you think of the racing in general? I mean, I thought the meeting as a whole looked really, really good. In fact, it really made me want to go up there next year.
Yeah, it was, the atmosphere was good, and the racing was good. It was okay. It was good. We had different winners, like Chaz won one, and yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been a very successful meeting up there, and it was good to see the superbikes. The superbikes turned on a good performance as well. I mean, so it was great to see. I mean, it reminds you of the old. We used to have a lot of 2+4 meetings. I remember a couple at Calder, and that this time of year actually, every June, July. At Sandown, basically what's become the July, the hot dog round at the Victorian State Series used to be the Sandown 2+4, which was crazy. I mean, imagine motorcycles around Sandown in the old layout, which was even more unforgiving than the current layout. Motorcycles around Sandown in the middle of July at sort of 8 degrees and pouring with rain for 3 days. It's amazing so many people survived, but used to be very, very popular. But now it, of course, is the hot dog round coming up for the Australian Sports Stand Association, and that's happening in a few weeks' time out at Sandown. It's one of the I know that it's very popular with a lot of the officials, like the team from the Australian Sports Stand Association go out of their way to make sure that to compensate the officials for the fact that it's they're spending so much time in very, very usually wet and cold conditions. But yes, so yes, Paul's saying, where is everyone? Dave has just sent me a message saying that he's on his way, but he's coming back from dinner, I think. So he's a man of leisure, Mr. Stillwell, and so he's coming back. As I said, Doc's chasing bits for old Falcons, and yeah, I don't know about Richard and Stewart, but. Anyway, they're out and about, and we'll be talking about that. The thing that came out straight after Darwin as well was the decision by PremiAir Racing, whose boss Peter Zibris won the Australian Top Fuel Championship on Saturday night. More about that later. But they decided to remove one Garry Jacobson as Dave joins us. Pete, that a surprise?
I thought it was. I don't think it seems strange that he did have a bit of a crash in the last race on Sunday, and I don't think that was the catalyst. It seemed strange to me because he seemed, I don't know, he seemed consistent to me.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't done anything wildly wrong that I can say. I mean, I can understand they might be saying that he's not as competitive as they were hoping, but he's certainly, it just seems to have come out of nowhere, and you wonder what else is going on. Dave's joining us now. Dave Stillwell. Dave, were you surprised at the move to get rid of Garry Jacobson?
I was a little bit. I mean, certainly, if we think of just how much change that operation or that organisation has been through in the last 9 months, we've gone from it being the abortive Team Sydney under, Jonathan Webb to Peter Chibris coming in. He's made a substantial investment in the team. He's relocated to the Gold Coast. The cars have had a substantial technical birthday with, major investment in an overhaul of the car and the latest upgrades from 888. He's made major investments in staffing. So I could see why, if you're of the opinion that, hang on, I've made all the investment in all the other resources around the people that fill the space between the seat and the steering wheel. That being, I could understand why, if you were looking for the next step of performance, that's the next piece of low-hanging fruit you might go for. But on the flip side, Garry was one of the standout performers at the Australian Grand Prix round. One of the best performers in a 888 built car when you consider his performance compared to, say, the other people sharing 888 hardware in Team 18 and Matt Stone Racing. I'd observe that the comments coming out of it is that the subway funding is for the team, not the driver, which is a very different relationship to what Chris Pither has with the team, because he brings the commercial package from Coca-Cola Amatil. So I can appreciate why, Garry was the one that was moved out. On a commercial perspective, Garry has quite publicly struggled with finding, a commercial package to find his way into the sport. I certainly hope there's space for him. He's one of the genuinely nice guys in the paddock. Unfortunately, it just appears that for the near future, he's going to be back to driving a school bus in Shepparton, which, admittedly, he is more than overqualified for that job. I certainly hope we can find a spot for him in the grid, but it just speaks to how cutthroat it is. There are only 25 seats at the table for supercars, and if the person who's, what is it they say, the golden rule, he or she with the gold makes the rules. And in this instance, Peter's decided that, he wants to go in a different direction, whether that's purely on a driver performance or whether it's commercial as well, who knows? So, let the wild and varied discussion about who the next, organic meat bag to fill the seat will be, unfold this evening. Who's your money on?
Yeah, well, I mean, the word around at the moment is Zane Goddard.
Zane Goddard, coming into the team, which will be interesting, because he's got the he'll be at Mount Panorama, or he's scheduled to be at Mount Panorama with Tickford in a drive there. So that's at least that's what's being said. So that could be the possible. It could be a swap like for like, if Goddard sort of gets the drive with PremiAir. And that would put him out at Tickford, which would open a possible co-driver spot for Garry Jacobson to jump in, because you'd think that with all of his current experience in those cars, he'd be more than a handy co-driver for Bathurst. Oh, definitely. And Garry has form with Tickford as well. He was obviously well entrenched there in the Super 2 program, and also in the Mega Fuels car as well, back when Tickford were, before they scaled down from 4 cars back to 3 cars, back up to 4 cars. So Garry has good relationships with people up and down the lane. So I'm sure he'll find something somewhere. But as we've seen, with Declan Fraser sharing with Craig Lowndes in a 888 wildcard, the Super Cheap Auto Make It Super car, which obviously tested during the week as well. When you consider that Cameron Hill has also tested with the team, he's part of the 888 Super 2 program as well. There will be no shortage of people that are either qualified or potentially bring something new and exciting to that team that certainly hopefully complements the job that Chris Pith has been doing. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Chris Pith has actually been doing a pretty outstanding job in qualifying. There's he missed out on the top 10 shootout by less than like 100th or 2 or 300ths of a second on this for the Saturday race. This is a team that's got good people in place. But if we've seen anything like the turnaround, say at Grove Racing, it can take 12 months or so, bringing in new people, making sure the process is correct before you start to see the on-track performance. And in the overall scheme of things, let's just keep in mind, just how competitive the supercars grid is. You're talking at Darwin, it was less than 5 or 6 tenths covering pretty much the entire field. So it only takes a tiny little gain to make a substantial difference to the qualifying performance.
It was. I mean, having a look, I tuned in at one stage, and I tuned in just as they were putting up sort of the qualifying lap times from the qualifying session there, and I had to sort of I did a double take, because I looked down at the bottom and I thought, hang on a second, they're all within a second of it. The entire field was within a second of each other. So in that respect, the categories work. If the idea is to have really, really close racing, then obviously the category's working, because there's the difference between the very fastest and the very slowest is a pretty narrow margin. But anyway, now speaking of which, I'll just say I asked Pete before we started, but Dave, did you happen to catch any of the? I'll let you. He's having his dumplings at the moment. So
Ask away. I can multitask. I can listen and eat food.
Listen and eat food. Well, there you go. I mean, that's why you're in the position you are, and we're all back here as mere citizens of the world. Did you happen to see any of the drag racing at all on Saturday night from Darwin?
I was otherwise engaged on Saturday night. I was babysitting my niece and nephew so that my twin sister and her husband could go to see the aeronautical extravaganza that is Top Gun Maverick. But the snippets that I've caught on social media and on some of the stuff that my friends have shared with me, that performance, along with the superbikes as part of, a full facet of, circuit sealed motorsport at Hidden Valley, it appears that the Northern Territory Major Events Corporation has stumbled upon a formula that works for that event that gives it a unique character. And all the people I know that say, if you've got to go to an event in another state, make it Darwin. I have personal experience from that before drag racing, and I'd say go to Darwin. Everything I've heard since would indicate, regardless of what you think about drag racing, it's not motorsport that you watch. It's motorsport that you feel, that you smell, and you taste as it flies through the air. I'm definitely putting it back on my bucket list based on everything I've heard.
Yeah, I was the same. I said, I think before, it's certainly something, as I was looking at it, was like, I've really got to go to that. And there's very few supercar rounds that, I think, no, I must be there. That's so certainly for next year. I doubt that I'm going to get to Le Mans, but hopefully if I'm spared to get to Darwin, I'll get there. And this time I might actually see Darwin, because all I've seen of Darwin is the track. So, but yeah, they put on a great show. I think that the show, the entertainment factor, the way they presented that drag racing on Saturday night was absolutely world class. It was not in terms of the quantity, but in terms of the quality, the way they presented it, the LED screens, the pyrotechnics, the flashing lights, and all the rest of it. It was one hell of a show. I can't see anybody who turned up on Saturday night and saw and heard and felt that, who would not say, yeah, and then say, we've got to go back. We have to go back. It was a great performance.
Yeah. If nothing else, the Darwin event, up until sort of pre-COVID, had started to feel, I don't want to say stale, but it had kind of lacked any unique identity other than it's an event in Darwin in the middle of, the southern winter, and it needed something more than it's really nice and warm and it's in Darwin. I think bringing together both the four-wheeled motorsport fanatics, the straight line motorsport fanatics, and the two-wheeled motorsport fanatics, with the three top national championships for Australia, all together in a region that doesn't get a huge amount of major events. Combine that with a fairly major presence from the military industrial complex, thanks to major Army, Air Force, and Navy detachments in Darwin. It's a recipe for success, and full credit, as I said once again, to the Northern Territory Major Events Corporation in conjunction with Supercars, with ASBK, and with the top fuel teams in Andra to bring that show together. It's not always easy. Watching some of the volunteer officials fling the air fences over once the four-wheel stuff is finished so that they can prep the circuit, have it ready for the two-wheel stuff, and then to be able to turn it around, flip the air fences back off again so they can go back to four-wheel stuff. It's something that takes a really focused group of people coming together, but also a fair degree of compromise. You can't just keep doing things the way they were always done. And it would appear that, even to the fact that we had, S5000, and the Australian Drivers' Championship and the Gold Star awarded as part of the event, and was it 29, 30 Carrera Cup cars as well?
That's just so successful.
At the other end of the support card, I've got to give a huge shout out to the local categories: Improved Production, Commodore Cup, Circuit Excels, and HQ Holdens. They all come together as a combined sedan field, but it's one of those events that if you've got an improved production car, it's also on your bucket list to go and race at that event. I literally was on the phone to Justin Wade from Midas Tingalpa, who's racing Ray Hislop's old EB Falcon GT. Front-running improved production car from back in the day. Justin's gone through a rebuild process on it. Justin was the one who told me to go to Darwin, 13 years ago now, and I don't regret going. You get, a half dozen or so, or up to, 10 or 12 interstate improved production, XL or HQ races, join the last dedicated Commodore Cup field in the country, and they put on a great show. And they are the track sweepers. They are the warm up people. They wake everyone up from their Woodstock and UDL induced hangovers at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. But they love it. All their racing's done by midday, so they can knock off, have a few beers, and go wander around and say hi to all the other motorsport people.
The thing about that,
all areas of the sport and all levels of the sport. So
the thing about that track too, I mean, the circuit is it seems to be a really well designed circuit. It's got that really long straight, so you're going to get lots of drafting down the main straight. But then you've got lots of twists and turns, and it's very hard to find the ideal line around there. And that in the main has promoted some pretty good racing in all of the categories. As you say, Carrera Cup was fantastic as well. The bikes were terrific. It really has become one of those must-see events, and congratulations to everybody concerned. They did a fabulous job there.
It's not done too badly for a circuit that was effectively, there's the drag strip, there's the return road. Oh, we'll put some wiggles in it. For a circuit that was never designed to be good, it just evolved naturally. It certainly speaks volumes about maybe not getting too caught up in trying to design a circuit a certain way, so it's got this radius of corner and this element. It's like, no, just build it as it is, make it different, and it's got a unique character, and it's fantastic. It's certainly got more character to it, than the other circuit that happens to be based in our hometown that features a drag strip as its major part of its.
Well, the difference is, that, they designed it properly by making sure that the drag strip and the front main straight were totally separate. So they could do that sort of thing. Because obviously, if you had that situation, even if Calder was still running, you couldn't run a meeting like that at Calder because you wouldn't be able to prepare the strip in time, and you wouldn't be able to unprepare the strip in time. So they had all that time. They had all day to run the tractors and the rubber up and down. They had plenty of time to put down the traction compound. It was completely separate from the rest of the circuit. Didn't do any problem. There were no problems at all. And I know there was a plan floating around at one stage to try and separate the main straight and the drag strip at Calder again. But that seems to be. Once again, we still have no idea of what's happening at what's happening there. Okay, to Sarah. Sarah is Sarah Bliss, who is a member of the In-Pit Lane crew. Hi, how are you, Sarah? Thanks for joining us. We'll catch up. We'll catch up very soon. We'll be the wrap party is on the way. I hope.
Fantastic. Well, at least we know it's going to be a blissful evening now that she's watching.
It is, yes. It's very, very, very blissful.
Speaking of blissful evenings and investments.
King of the segues.
Wasn't it great to see the news today? I'm not sure if I missed it the first few minutes of the show, but don't talk about Calder. Yeah, Calder has its moments, but it was a great track 25, 30 years ago. Now, not so much.
I preferred the short one. I think they ruined it when I know why they had to extend it, but I thought the short one was there. In fact, one of the examples I give as to why it was so good actually involves someone well known to you, Dave, because you'd go out to Calder in the early 70s, and you'd see all the big V8s would blast down that long straight and get away and up the back straight. But then there was all that twisty stuff in there, and there was this little red and yellow Escort that used to sort of dive around people, and if it was a little bit wet, as it occasionally was at Calder Park, he'd get up there and frighten the big boys, and it was always great racing. They'd put on some terrific racing on the short circuits.
Well, talking about putting on great racing on a shortened circuit, wasn't it great to see the news today about the South Australian government locking in a 5-year deal for the Adelaide 500? Not only
It's never going to happen. It's never going to. No,
we're going to tear up the racetrack and return horse racing to Victoria. No, shut up. 5 years for the Adelaide 500 as the season finale. 5 years of the gala dinner for supercars also on the Monday. And also a major resurfacing of almost, I think it's basically the entire circuit with the exception of between turns 7 and 9. So basically the two really long straight bits stay the same. Everything in between will get resurfaced, including the concrete hardstand that forms the pit lane garages. That's not been renewed since the 1980s for the Formula One Grand Prix. So again, kudos to the SA government. As part of that, I believe they've also relocated in conjunction with Australian Equestrian Society, what was the Australian International 3-day, essentially the equestrian version of a motorsport festival. That's been relocated. That's been relocated into effectively the traditional Adelaide 500 time in March. So they'll all kind of share the parkland facilities. And again, the investments that the government makes in those facilities will also pay dividends for a whole bunch of other park users. Of course, there's a whole lot of cycling that takes place there during the year. So again, I can't wait to see supercars, or at least motorsport, back on the streets of Adelaide at the end of the year to finish a season. It's not Formula One, but you can't have everything. And then to even hear that they'll be treating it a little bit like, the Monaco event, where they'll run, an historic event and a main series event, a week or two apart. To have the Adelaide Motorsport Festival coming back, it's gonna, it's great to see motorsport getting the recognition it deserves, backed by the newly elected government in South Australia that recognises the value that the sport and the people that support the sport, bring to the city of Adelaide.
It's also very good the fact that it's being run. They've reformed the motorsport, the South Australian Motorsport Board, so it's not a supercars related thing. And they were always very good, even in the days of Formula One. They were always very good in having sort of that. They had all of the major all the categories and everything that you would expect to have there. But then at the same time, there was always a spot on the card for something more grassroots. I mean, we had sports sedans there, we had supercarts there, Group N historic touring cars. Over the years, it was a great thing.
So I hope everything.
Yeah, I hope they would do that again, because that certainly, it was a big thing for that category. I mean, you can imagine the numbers they could get if they said, okay, we're going to have an improved production race as part of the thing as well, or an Excel race, or Formula V even, just something different, just to sort of fill up.
Or maybe the final round of a newly reconstituted Australian Formula Ford Championship with all new cars from 2024. Wouldn't that be a sight to see?
Let's talk about that, because from what I've heard from a few people from the inside, that this is a bit of a departure from what originally was going to happen. And the good news is there'll be new cars, and they'll have certainly some improved safety features, which it probably needs, but it won't be a one-make series. Basically, the formula will be put out there, and Borland can make them, and anybody else out there, any internationals or any locals who want to make a Formula Ford chassis to the new regulations, they can do it. I think that's great.
Absolutely. It's certainly a recognition that Formula Ford in Australia, regardless of what it's called, presents well as both an entry-level point to the sport as a whole, as a junior driver. It, by making it not a one-make category, it provides it with a unique selling prospect compared to all the other myriad, cookie-cutter series. But also, it fosters not just the next generation of drivers, but also the next generation of fabricators, engineers, technicians, teams. And it's the kind of car that, if you've got a technical rule book, it encourages people to, read the regulations and interpret them differently and come up with different concepts. The other thing is, of course, it's not going to be a composite monocoque tub. It's still going to be a steel space frame.
Yeah, that surprised me a lot, but I think it's a good move.
From a longevity perspective, certainly we know in historic racing, there are often concerns about the longevity of carbon fibre tubbed cars, purely because the stresses that they're subjected to are not as easily visible as they are to a vehicle made, say, from an aluminium monocoque or from a steel space frame.
Well, I think we saw those shots years ago from a historic meeting. I think it might have even been the Rolex reunion at Laguna Seca with a Ferrari that literally just disintegrated in it. Just it hit a bump and just disintegrated, and that's one of the reasons why when we spoke to the guys at Phillip Island earlier in the year, his name just Guido Belgiorno Nettis, when we spoke to him about his Ferrari. And why it was racing out here. One of the reasons he's got both of those cars, the Stefano Johansson and the Michele Alboreto car, was the fact that they couldn't race them in Europe in the historic Formula One events over there because they don't allow the carbon fibre chassis cars apparently.
Yeah. So certainly from a long-term value and maintenance perspective, going with a less a non-stressed, going with a traditional steel tube space frame chassis makes it easy to repair. It still offers a very similar level of protection when it's designed in the same way. It's obviously heavier as a result than a composite monocoque would be. And there are different design challenges around that. But by being able to meet all the FIA crash standards required of a junior formula, they're using a steel halo rather than a titanium halo. So we have experience with that technology now, having had the S5000 cars here, which are, again, rather than having those built here, we actually ended up getting a tub from Ligier or Crawford Composites in the USA for that car. Whereas this will offer, local homegrown constructors, as you say. And of course, there has often been talk about the recent reorganisation and relocation of some of the operations of 888 Race Engineering. As we go into the next generation of supercars, the amount of components, be they complete chassis or components that get bolted onto the chassis, is going to change dramatically for 888 Race Engineering. Could this present them with an opportunity to, be an engineering manufacturing business, as they've stated they are, that happens to go racing? I think it'd be great to see, continue the Queensland-Victorian rivalry. We'd have Baldwin Racing Developments in Braeside versus, 888 Race Engineering in Banyo. It'd be great to have, just to have that kind of rivalry between the chassis, and they won't be locked in. There'll be continual evolutions of, and providing that you can design a chassis that meets the crash standard test, it doesn't stop anyone from being a small-scale constructor and designing the one-off cars, the specials.
Yeah, because certainly, like the original fear, I think, from a lot of the Formula Ford guys, including Mike Borland, when I spoke to him at the start of the year, was that a lot of people were worried that basically 888 were going to be going to move into that market, and probably there would be a control chassis, and it would probably be something out of 888 or something sort of approved by 888, and that hasn't happened. It's interesting, they haven't made any sort of announcements that I've seen regarding the engine at this stage. You'd have to think at some stage they'd be looking to replace that Duratec engine, although perhaps people are more happy with still having it there. But they've certainly done that in America, for instance. They run the Honda engine in Formula Ford over there.
Formula F rather than Formula Ford.
Formula Ford.
They use a 1.5 litre. Remember, of course, in the US, they never really went to. If we talk about Formula Ford, even though it's a global formula, there are a myriad number of variations around the world. In the UK, of course, the traditional formula, which was based around the 1.6 litre Kent engine, overhead valve, not overhead camshaft. carburetor fed. They then later on went to what they called the Z-Tech engine, which was a 1.6 or even a 1.8 litre engine, I think, at some point.
Yeah, I think it was 1.8.
That got different fuel injected, but different camshafts, fairly substantially overhauled engine. Australia never went that. And then, of course, in 2005, 2006, I think, we got the Duratec engine, which is a 1.6 litre, 16 valve twin cam engine that was in the Ford Fiesta and the Ford Focus and all manner of Ford products. It's the kind of thing you could pick up at the wreckers for, a couple $100, bolt the control parts onto, put the dry sump on, and run it, because it ran all the standard interior components. It didn't have, fancy pistons and rods and different camshafts. It was just the standard engine. Whereas, of course, in the UK, they had the Duratec, but they put different cams in it and different this, that, and the other thing. And then even with the Formula Ford, they went to I think they proposed they were going to go to the 1 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged EcoBoost engine at one point, or the 1.6 EcoBoost, which incidentally was the engine we had in Formula 4 without the D on the end. Ford's been a great supporter of the development of motorsport in the past. There has been, differing levels of commitment over the years. Certainly, Ford is still producing internal combustion powertrains and will continue to do so for at least the next 10 to 15 years. This could be an opportunity for a different manufacturer to step up. But remembering, of course, that it's not just about here's an engine, use it. It has to be, designed, very substantially differently to suit two different chassis, because it'll change the attachment points onto the back end of the monocoque. It'll change how it adapts to the casing between the engine and the gearbox, which is traditionally on these smaller Formula cars where they hold the dry sump tank for the engine oil. It'll change, based on how long the engine is or how tall it is. That'll make substantial changes to the center of gravity and the overall length of the chassis. So it's not just as simple as, manufacturer X turning up and say, I want to sign a 5-year deal to be the engine supplier. It needs to be a very long-term commitment. And apart from Ford, no one else has made that commitment in the open wheeler marketplace in Australia in the last 25 years.
Be interesting to see how they sort of, if they do try to sort of update the appearance and anything. That was one of the problems in terms of marketing that we had many years ago, and I still find that the late Howard Marsden came in onto the show, onto Win Pit Lane, obviously many years ago before he died, and actually brought in some artists' impressions of what they were seeing as the future of Formula One, and yes, Formula Ford, and it did have wings on it, and it looked like a miniature Formula One car, but as he said, we said it was the reason they were doing that was not because they wanted to introduce aerodynamics. So the aero would be designed to be neutral. It wasn't going to provide any huge amount of extra downforce. It was going to be there to basically to make the cars look more modern. Because when the marketing people, did a bit of market research and said, what do you think of Formula Ford? All the young kids were going, God, they're so old. And of course they weren't old at all. It's just they just don't look like your modern wings and slicks racing car, and it's it might be a bit hard to sell that. But I haven't seen any mention of having any aero on them. So, and that's probably what you want if they're going to put any aero on. You'd really want to make sure that it didn't really have any effect on. And of course that's just something else to knock off in close competition as well.
It will become one of those philosophical questions that the people in the industry, and remember, this isn't just a decision that Motorsport Australia has taken independently. It's been taken in conjunction with, the Formula Ford Association. So Phil Marinon was quite positive in his reports of what he thinks of the developments. It's also been tackled in conjunction with, members of, Ryan Story, who's from the Australian Motor Racing Commission, who's got a lot of interest in, supporting young talent coming through. Of course, they're the team that supplies the supercar test to the winner of the Formula Ford Series, soon to be championship status again. But also they worked in conjunction with the very high scale teams that are running customer cars and preparing these cars at a high level for the various state and national series, and also the constructors of said cars. So you certainly won't. I don't think you'll be able to please give everyone 100% of what they want. But I think this is the moment where you can make a genuine, really good product that works in the Australian marketplace, that's attractive to junior drivers moving out of karting, and it has to provide. And that's where that aerodynamic discussion will occur. Is if you want it to act as a development pathway to go to, say, Toyota 86 series, Super 3, cool. Super 2 supercars, you would want it to have probably as little aero as possible.
Yeah.
But if you want it to be a genuine local starting point to figure out, hey, have you got what it takes to maybe make the investment and move overseas? Well, then maybe it does need to have a little bit of aero on it before you go and jump into, say, a Formula 4 car overseas or a Formula regional car.
That was the big criticism, the international criticism of Formula 4 as a training ground, because we interviewed Trevor Carlin at Macau years ago, and he didn't say it on air because he said, look, I don't want to get anybody into trouble or anything, but he said, look, he said, you keep sending us, he said, there's lots of talent over there, he said, but they come over way, way too late. And he used as an example John Martin. And he said, we should have got this kid 3 or 4 years ago. We should have got him at 16 or 17 tops. He said, but the problem was, he said, he pretty much wasted a year over there. He said, just learning and understanding that, the way you drove a modern open wheeler with decent aerodynamics. He said, because it was great sliding it around all over the place, looked spectacular, but by gee, he was way off the pace until we sort of knocked it into him that's not how you drive one of these cars.
And I think the good thing is that someone like Mike Borland from Borland Racing Developments is quite well positioned to advise the technical working group on what the benefits and pitfalls of something like this is, because not only does he build chassis that run in the Australian Formula Ford representation at state and national level, but he's also been making great inroads into the US market. Now, over there, as we said, they've had a Kent series for forever. The 1600cc class has effectively become Formula F. They run a sealed motor that comes from Honda Performance Developments. It's a 1.5 litre, basically just a slightly smaller capacity Honda version of what a Duratec is. But what they've also got in the US is Formula Ford 2000, which is basically what you're talking about. It's the same chassis. It's got a 2-litre Zetec engine in it, or 2-litre Pinto engine in it, I should say. So a single overhead cam, 8-valve engine, with a small front wing on it and a small rear wing on it. And as we know, friend of the show, Paul Zitti's got one of those, liveried up in the Jill's Pretty Special livery. And he's been, he'd be well positioned to give his feedback on what advantages or disadvantages that has. But as we say, it will involve a compromise. It's more stuff you got to spend on the car. It's more spares you got to carry. It's more stuff that you can bash into people and damage wheels and interlock with other people's tyres. So it's not that one pathway is the right way or the wrong way. They're different, and whichever decision that they make will have consequences. So I'm sure that they'll engage with as many stakeholders as they can to ensure they reach the best decision for the new category going forward, and certainly for the future of Australian junior level motorsport.
Be interesting. Box is saying the new Formula Ford at Albert Park would be great. Make the AGP an all-open wheeler event along with Formula. I can't see that happening somehow, but it would be a good play. I mean, if they really want to send it off, start it off with a bang, because it's not going to happen next year. It's going to be 2024. So if they really wanted to start it off in a bang, announcing that now would be really good. So, Pete, what do you think? I mean, are you looking forward to seeing these things? You enjoy watching the lower levels of open wheelers, or you just more focused on F1?
No, I do. But the thing, I've got a vested interest because a lot of venues are very difficult for me to get to. So the thing I like about the Grand Prix is I get all categories in the one weekend. I get my fix of all categories on the weekend. So I have to say I would be sad if the supercars were done away with.
Yeah, I think that's not going to happen, guys. So I think the one year we saw that they didn't run for whatever reason, crowds are very, very much down. I've seen some private market research from a few years back where a very, very large percentage of the crowd said that if the supercars weren't here, we probably wouldn't bother. So. And especially now that it's a championship round as well. As we said last week, the only problem now is for S5000. I mean, we saw them in action at Darwin on the weekend, and I don't know about they've just they flatter to deceive. They look good, they sound good, but. I think they need a big injection of one more cars, but two more young talent, and there's a few drivers in there. And I mean, you can't. It's great for people like Tim Macro and all that to be there, and John Martin and those guys. But I'd much rather see them get some of those kids out of straight out of Formula Ford, and see them behind the wheel and give them something worth chasing. Say, okay, like in Formula Ford, say, okay, the Gold Star winner will get, a scholarship or, $100,000 to put towards a Carrera Cup drive or something like that to make it really, really encourage, young people, the fathers of young people to get involved and say, okay, we're gonna put you into this, category because this is the stepping stone into the top level.
Yeah, definitely. But again, we'll see how it pans out. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge or bridges before the new national championship kicks off in 2024. But certainly, this would, I guess, start to put in place in people's minds about giving some certainty to the teams and all the stakeholders involved that they can go away and work on. This will be effectively Formula Ford's Gen 3. It's about, making a car that's relevant, that meets all the safety criteria, that is going to be built by a couple of different people. Admittedly, as Russell said, the F4 type cars and training concept Peter Thompson ran at Sepang was a very impressive setup for aspiring youngers looking towards F1. There are Formula 4 series that have been very successful. In other
hugely
markets.
Successful.
So we've got a very successful Formula 4 in the UAE, running at both Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Very successful Formula 4 in Italy, in Germany, and in France. In the UK, it is sort of working fairly well, but the UK open wheeler pyramid's a little bit different now because you got GB2 and got GB3 and GB4, and it's kind of all sort of at the same level. And
they got caught up with it's the politics. Once again, I mean, in terms of between the two different groups of promoters, and it's a bit like the Judean People's Front and the People's Front of Judea. It's they're divided, and while ever they're divided, as we saw with kart and IRL, and as we've seen in Australian local drag racing, divided we fall. I mean, you got to come together, guys. And that would be better for everybody.
Yeah. If nothing else, the sort of all the feeder categories to Europe now kind of broadly fall under the same sort of umbrella. We have a Formula 4 spec series moving up to what used to be called Formula 3, but is now called Formula Regional. It's effectively a Formula 3 spec tub, but at a regional level. So that's where Formula Renault's ended up, or the Formula Renault Euro Series. And that, of course, then you go to International Formula 3, which is what's on the Formula 1 card. International Formula 2, the gateway to Formula 1, and then Formula 1. Well, of course, and this is what and those two series, Formula 2 and Formula 3, are also promoted by Formula 1, essentially. So it puts them all in the same bill, kind of like what we're seeing in the US now with Penske, or the Penske Corporation, taking back in-house the promotion of the Indy Lights Series. They're trying to make sure there's a pyramid or a pathway to step up to the top level of US open wheel racing. I guess in Australia, we probably don't have a whole lot between Formula V and Formula Ford, and then you've got to make a jump from a car with 130, 140 horsepower to a car that's got 580 horsepower. There's a bit of a gap there in terms of the driver development. But I think kudos to everyone involved. I'm sure there's a lot more to come out of this. And as we'll see, I'm sure there'll be some drip feeding I'm sure someone will leak a concept design at some point, and someone will arc up about, it should look like this, it should look like that. I mean, remember when we were having all the discussions about what the outcome of S5000 was, when there was the debate between old school's Thunder 5000 and new school Super 5000, and we wanted to look like the new car but also the old car, and this, that, and the other thing, and eventually we got where we got to. So
yeah, as speaking of Formula 4, Hugh Barter had a bad weekend, but he's been very successful. He's still doing very well in the French, certainly in the French series, but he didn't have the best of weekends last weekend. Christian Mansell continues to do well, but as he said, nobody's Oliver Goethe is just. He's the dominant force in that particular Formula Euro Open or Euro Formula Open, whatever it's called, but that's a Formula regional thing. The racing's great. Cars are lovely, old-fashioned style Formula 3 cars. Look really good.
What was the Paul's smarter white milk ad? I just want Formula 3 that tastes like real Formula 3.
Well, I always said that those Formula 3 cars, I think, were, from a dimensional point of view, they were the best looking open wheelers around. Everything looked to be in perfect in proportion. They were a really, really nice looking car, and they of course put some fantastic racing on, and. We were lucky enough, as I said years ago, to go to the Macau Grand Prix, and it was just fabulous racing there. And it's once again a bucket list thing if you get the opportunity to ever go to Macau. A strange place, a strange race meeting, but nonetheless fantastic racing at the time, and that's very much. And the people who do well at Macau, you'll hear about them pretty quickly in the next few years in Formula One. Hey, listen. Anybody else got anything before we head off? We might take this opportunity for a break. Yeah, Spa 24-hour happening this weekend. Matt Campbell
Goodwood Festival of Speed as well.
Goodwood Festival of Speed, Pikes Peak, the Watkins Glen 6 hours. I haven't seen anyone where that they're televising Pikes Peak, but certainly Goodwood will definitely be is definitely being televised. In fact, as we speak, and they've got the first day, and they'll have certainly Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They're the big days, particularly for motorsport, and that's all on their YouTube channel. And we'll put a link on the In Pit Lane page as well. We've also got the World Rally Championship happening on the weekend. So, yeah, I mean, there is no shortage of motorsport for you to watch this weekend, and I mean, it's probably going to be a good weekend, at least in the 10th most livable city in the world, to sort of lock the doors and rug up and watch some motorsport from places that are having much better weather than we are at the moment.
It'll be interesting to see between the Goodwood Festival of Speed and the 6 hours at the Glen just how many of the next generation hypercars and LMDH cars we might see. We've started to see all the reveals of the Cadillac LMDH, and boy, doesn't that look stunning. We've also started to hear rumours. Of course, we'll see the BMW hypercar in the flesh without too much disguise on it. Admittedly, it might just be a concept model rather than a rolling prototype. But isn't it incredible how the Goodwood Festival of Speed has kind of evolved from just being, it's a hill climb for some old cars and some new cars and a little bit of funky stuff, and it's now become effectively the biggest automotive reveal event that's replaced most of the traditional motor shows. I can't remember the last time we had a motor show in Australia. I mean, it's kind of gone by the wayside. And
it's well and truly gone now.
And I'd certainly say going forward, the enthusiasm for vast amounts of people to cram into indoor convention center spaces and breathe the same air over and over and over and over and over again with people that have come from all over the world might have tailed off a bit compared to, say, pre-February 2020. So to be able to do it out in the English countryside, and it is traditional English summer, it is raining right now on the Goodwood Festival of Speed live stream. Ed Foster getting a little bit wet doing his interviews with people down at the start line. And as Van den Akker fires in, we've got a Pro Motocross Series from up in Newcastle, live on SBS in the Speed Week time slot on Sunday Arvo.
Oh, that'll be good.
Knackers, are you heading up to that one, or that one's just popped up in your diary? We'll need to see what happens with that. But I'm very much looking forward to heading up north in a couple of weeks to go to Townsville. So that's looking good. But what an entry for the Total 24 hours of Spa. 60-something GT3 cars. The biggest GT3 race on the planet.
Yeah, and quite a few Australians. We've already mentioned Matt Campbell, but you mentioned Grove Racing. Steve Grove and his son are over there. They're racing. There's quite a number of Australians running, so that will be covered on the weekend, as well as, of course, will Watkins Glen on IMSA.tv. So that's there. The other good bit of news is I saw announced earlier in the week is that when it comes around a couple of weeks' time, the Le Mans Classic is going to be given full coverage on Radio Show Limited, on Radio Le Mans, and also they've also confirmed it's not part of the live stream, but there will apparently be some live streaming from there, so you can do a test cricket thing and turn the television sound down and listen to the team from Radio Le Mans wax lyrical about all the fabulous cars at the Le Mans Classic. So, no shortage of things to go there. Paul is flying up on Saturday morning. So so he's heading up there to do there. Mad Cow Mark is saying hello, Chris.
Hello, Mad Cow.
Okay, well, having done that, and that's contractually, we had to do that because contractually Chris has to say one thing per program. Otherwise, he doesn't get the enormous appearance fee that he demands from us.
Appearance fee?
Apparently, it's also a community welfare check. We've got to make sure his face actually moves in the course of the broadcast so that we can check he's still alive. Go, oh, good. We don't have to send the police around for another week. Oh, okay, good, great.
Okay, well, we will see you all hopefully next week, and we'll have some more stuff to talk about. Doc will be back probably talking MotoGP news. Jack Miller got third at the Saxon Ring. Well done to Jack. I didn't see the race myself on the weekend. There was just so much else on as well. But anyway, thank you, Bob.
Formula One went around in Canada, apparently.
Oh yeah, I don't think we even got to that, did we? Let's quickly, Pete. I'd forgot all about it.
Max Verstappen won in Canada.
Okay, I think that's all.
That's all we need to know. And the McLarens had a torrid time.
A torrid time.
Okay.
Yes, but again, Daniel did quite well, I thought. He did.
Well, at least he finished in front of his teammate.
Yeah. And there wasn't a lot of the overtaking that they predicted. There wasn't a lot. And I think part of that is the porpoising, but part of that, because the cars do seem to be able to stay close for a lot of the laps, but a part of that is porpoising. But I don't think we should be changing rules halfway through a season, because some of them have got on top of the porpoising and others haven't. And there's been times where you've had McLaren dominate, and we haven't changed the rules halfway through a season. Red Bull's dominated. We haven't changed the rules halfway through a season. So
I think the problem, I can understand, I mean, that was one of the arguments for getting rid of ground effects back in the day, was the toll that it was taking on the bodies of drivers, because they were so stiffly sprung, and there was porpoising happening back then as well. So the reason, they're just too effective. But as you say, I mean, it's punishing the people who have got it right, and clearly Red Bull have got it as right as anybody else. They're still porpoising on the Ferrari, but it's obviously not as bad as on the Mercedes. I mean, you have a look at the Mercedes; it looks absolutely terrible. But why should everybody else be punished because Mercedes can't get it right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit shoe on the other foot after the last 10 years, 8 or 9 years of technical domination by the Mercedes AMG Formula One team.
Yeah, I think that's something that they're having trouble coming to grips with, particularly Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton. I mean, they're not used to being in this position, and I don't think they're handling it altogether well. They've already said that they said there will be some major changes, as much as they can do within the limits of the regulations and the cost cap. There will be some major changes coming to the car for the British Grand Prix. There'll be a few considerable upgrades that they're hoping will make a real. So they're getting closer. I mean, they get just a little closer every single time.
Sorry.
Just pop that up there for the moment. Ray Quincy. Now there's a famous name in the world of motorcycle racing in Australia. It's talking about the Sandown 2+4. Ray. So yes, unfortunately passed away. So huge name in motorcycle racing. So yeah, our condolences to the friend and family of Ray Quincy and the Quincy family, very famous family in local motorsports. So and motorcycle racing. So thanks for that, Paul, for letting us know about that. Okay, everybody. Let's call it a night or a day or an evening, or let's call it Gordon or George or whatever we like to call it. But let's say goodbye. We'll see you all next week at the same time for another edition of Full Course Yellow. Just a reminder, In Pit Lane returning to the screens of Channel 31 as planned in September this year. We'll get there as the guys know and a few other people know. I've had other things on my mind recently, but hopefully coming out the other end of all that stuff health wise, and we'll be able to get stuck back into actually doing things for a change. Okay. That's all we've got. That's all we've got time for. I hope you've enjoyed it. You have been watching or listening to, or you have indeed just missed Full Course Yellow. Until we see you all again next week, from all of us here, good night.